I am joined now by Jake Obetsebi-Lamptey, the chairman of the new Patriotic Party, or NPP, who joins us via telephone link-up from the Ghanaian capital, Accra. Good evening, Jake.
Good evening, Shaka. Good evening to your viewers and listeners.
How are you? By
His grace, better than good.
How would you characterize the mood on the ground in the capital, Accra?
We're working very hard to make sure that we contain the spirit of affront that many of our supporters have, asking them to channel that spirit creatively and positively. And we managed to get them to support the stance of the party leadership that we should not be taking protests out onto the streets and doing any damage to anybody or any property, but that we should strengthen our democracy by taking our case to the Supreme Court.
Now briefly, Jake, tell us really, if you were to talk to us from the deepest, better part of your Ghanaian heart and soul, why have you rejected the results?
Because it's not a matter of just trying to see if Nana Akufo-Addo can become president or not, because you know, the figures that the court may ultimately decide on probably will not turn the verdict over, but may expose us to a second round, which will still be very, very keenly contested. The idea is that we should strengthen our democracy. We should work towards making sure that we don't have a situation where a government in power, not only abuses the incumbency and whatever, but also is able to abuse the process of the counting and abuse and perpetuates itself in power. Because if we're going to protect our democracy in the long term, and we must, because we don't want to go back to the dark old days, we have to make people believe that they really do have some power in their thumb, and that their vote matters, and that the ballot box is the way to change government, not the bullet. We've been through all the coups and everything else. We don't want to get to a situation again where people start to feel that the only way to change a government is by insurrection. We don't need it. What the country needs is a stable democratic government and stable rule of law. That will give us long-term development.
Now, Jake, do you sincerely have what someone would characterize as incontrovertible evidence, not liable to falter?
The Constitution says that for us to be able to have any impact at all, we must be able to show that there is a pattern. There's a pattern in this. There's a pattern in the fraud, and that the numbers involved are sufficient to affect the overall outcome. So if we don't have that, then there's no point going to the courts. Once we have that, then we have it in a way that will stand up to the scrutiny of the Supreme Court, because that court is going to use all sorts of different ways to validate whatever evidence we bring forward. So we have to make absolutely sure that there's no technicality, that anything that we bring as evidence can be turned out so that our evidence is refused and when we cannot meet the constitutional demands.
Now, the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Chief Dr. Kwado Afarijan, has said, frankly, that you have no case. He has said you have no case, and you know as well as I do that if there is anyone in that particular position on the continent whose credentials are impeccable, it has to be Afarijan.
Well, that is one of the other things that we are seeking to examine, because at the end of the day, the Constitution gives the Electoral Commission an incredible amount of power over the electoral process. But we have to all realize that the Electoral Commission is made up of human beings, and human beings are frail. Just because you become a worker of the Electoral Commission cannot suddenly make you a virtuous person if you were not virtuous before. Cannot make you a tall person if you were short. You're still a human being, you're still a Ghanaian, still subject to all the failings of Ghanaians. And if there have been failings of the Electoral Commission from the polling station up to the highest level, then we must, as a service to the growth of democracy, expose those failings so that those failings can be corrected and again, our democracy enhanced and strengthened.
We know that your government, when your party was in power, you appointed a Chief Justice, and that is the lady who still holds the fort. To what extent would you say that you have confidence in Ghana's judiciary system?
Well, we are the party that supports law and order. We support the courts, and we continue to put our faith into the hands of the courts. So I don't think we can be going to court and then at the same time saying that we have no faith in the court. What we have to realize is that the Supreme Court is a very conservative body, and that for them to take the sort of action that we want, they must have very, very solid evidence. Okay? Because you must present to them evidence where they turn around and say they really have no choice but to accept that evidence and then let that evidence play within the whole declaration process.
What about the fact that, Mr. Jake, what about the fact that both the local observers, the coalition of domestic election observers and the other international election monitors have given a clean of health, a bill of health really, to the election?
Well, we have 275 constituencies, 26,000 polling stations. The AU ECOWAS mission numbered, I think, about a dozen or dozen and a half. The Commonwealth mission was about the same, about a dozen. What they can see in the short time that they're here and throughout the election process is the surface of things. And we have to also say that we applaud the Ghanaian people. We applaud the Ghanaian people for their commitment to the democratic process. We applaud them for their patience. I mean, these people queued from Thursday night throughout Friday and then came back again on Saturday, okay, throughout the heat of the day, just to make sure that their votes were cast. And we were able to do this with a huge measure of peace. Only in one region have we had reports of any level of intimidation. So we really do applaud the Ghanaian people. But if you're an observer, you observe the process. You don't necessarily observe what the additions that are going on, or that you can actually see, what figures are being added up. So, yes, you can say it was free and fair, and we're not disputing that. So we're not saying it's an unfair election in that sense, but what we're saying is that the mistakes were made, most probably deliberate, but at the end of the day, we don't have to even show that they were deliberate, just that mistakes were made in the addition and tabulation.
Good luck, Jake Obetsebi-Lamptey. That was the chairman of the major Ghanaian opposition party, the NPP. He spoke to us live from the Ghanaian capital, Accra.